At his brother's wedding, my husband pulled his hand away and muttered, "Don't embarrass me. You're just here to carry the baby." I forced a tearful smile, already preparing myself for the speech I was about to give. When it was finally my turn, I spoke honestly. I've always despised weddings. Not because I didn't believe in love, I once believed in it with every fiber of my being, but because weddings tend to expose everyone's true colors, especially when you're not the bride. It was a warm May afternoon when we arrived at the venue, a space awash in white and gold that sparkled under the gentle California sun. His brother, Thomas, had gone all out, sparing no expense. As my husband, Richard, adjusted his cufflinks with the ease of a seasoned professional, I balanced our 7-month-old daughter Lily on my hip, her rosy cheeks unaware of the brewing tension. I hadn't truly wanted to come. Lily was teething, I was exhausted, and Richard had been snappy for weeks, but his firm, unyielding voice had insisted, "We're not starting drama. It's my brother's wedding. Act presentable." So I pulled my hair back, put on the navy blue dress he had chosen, and practiced smiling in front of the mirror until it seemed natural. We sat near the front, right behind Thomas and his new wife. Richard beamed with pride, as though his affection for his brother outshone everything, including me. I shifted Lily onto my lap and reached for his hand. My fingers brushed his and he recoiled as if I had burned him, then leaned in with a low, cutting whisper. "Don't embarrass me. You're just a baby carrier today. Look nice, stay quiet." In that moment I felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out all that was human from inside me, leaving only bare skin. I laughed lightly, hoping no one would notice or hear my inner anguish. I scanned the room at the poised, polished women sitting nearby, wondering if they too had become mere vessels defined by the roles of wife and mother. I didn't cry, not then. When the speeches began, his mother started first, tearfully recounting tales of the brothers growing up. His father followed with droll humor that managed polite chuckles, and then it was Richard's turn. He spoke of loyalty and family tradition with a commanding tone. Then, unexpectedly, the microphone landed in my hands. "Would you like to say a few words?" asked Thomas with an oblivious smile, unaware of the storm raging beneath my surface. Richard shot me a sharp look and muttered, "You don't have to," using a tone that left no room for comfort. But I stood, forcing a smile as I gripped the microphone. It felt cold, foreign, and surprisingly heavy, and my heart pounded so loudly I almost drowned out the sudden hush in the reception hall. Every eye was on me while Richard's burned with disapproval. I began softly, almost too quietly. "Thank you for letting me speak. I wasn't planning on it, but weddings are these rare moments we remember." A few polite nods met my words and I glanced briefly at Richard. His face a frozen, tight smile. I was only 26 then, filled with nervous hope as I believed I was marrying a man who truly saw me. I recalled wedding mornings with dreams of coffee-filled Sundays and whispered baby names in the dark, of someone holding your hand when you're tired and your shirt stained with formula. A soft murmur rippled across the room. Richard tilted his head in silent warning, yet I pressed on. "But sometimes you wake up and realize you've become part of the furniture. You're no longer a partner, merely an accessory, a vessel." I noticed a fork clatter onto a plate as the room's silence deepened. Only Lily's innocent babbling filled the space. My hand trembled as I gripped the microphone tighter and locked eyes with Richard. I continued, "Sometimes the one you married, the one who once said you made them better, will flinch when you reach out, not out of anger, but because they've forgotten you're human." My voice broke slightly, yet I persisted. I turned to Thomas and the newlywed couple and said, "I hope you never stop truly seeing each other, even when life gets loud, messy, and hard, because when you don't, marriage stops being a partnership and becomes just a performance." With that, I returned the microphone and strode off the stage, my palms sweating. I didn't look back. I simply reached for Lily, who had been briefly taken by Richard's cousin, and pulled her close to my chest. Richard didn't follow immediately, and when he finally did, it was at the back of the building near the parking lot where the clamor of champagne and bodies faded into quiet, cool air. "What was that all about?" he hissed, his eyes wide with controlled anger. "Are you out of your mind?" I responded in a soft, truthful tone. "You embarrassed me in front of all your family." I looked up at him, daring him to see that I existed beyond the role he confined me to. His nostrils flared as he replied, "Go home now. We'll talk later." He didn't offer any help with Lily, didn't even glance at her before turning back into the celebration, as if I were just an inconvenience trailing in his wake. I drove home alone that night with Lily sleeping in the back seat. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry without guilt. The morning after the wedding, Richard acted as though nothing had happened. He poured his coffee, kissed Lily on the forehead, and scrolled through his phone like it was just another lazy Sunday. I stood by the sink, watching him like a stranger who had inadvertently wandered into my kitchen. My body ached from carrying Lily, my chest was tight from sleeplessness, yet he barely glanced my way. "I'm heading to the gym," he stated flatly, not waiting for a response. "And don't forget, my parents are coming over at 3 o'clock. And please don't bring up last night." I blinked, trying to process his words. "That's it," I managed. He paused, as if confirming he had nothing more to say. I remained silent, There was no use in arguing. Richard never apologized, not for me. We hadn't always been like this. When we first met, he was magnetic. A man with sharp suits, quick wit, and a confidence that could light up any room. He noticed the little things, like how I unconsciously chewed my straw when anxious, the books I adored but never finished, the way I laughed wholeheartedly. But after we married, things shifted. Subtly at first, he started correcting me at dinners, stopped holding my hand in public, and when I became pregnant, he grew annoyed rather than angry. It was as if I had become less useful with every added pound, every instance of tiredness. When Lily arrived, he barely held her, claiming he didn't want to do it wrong. Months slipped by without him trying at all, and soon I found myself handling every diaper change, every feeding, every late-night cry, every doctor visit. When I once asked if he could change a diaper, he laughed and said, "You're naturally better at that." It wasn't instinct, it was sheer exhaustion, a desperate attempt at survival. Later that afternoon, when his parents visited, I forced the same composed smile I'd worn for so long. His mother remarked on how quietly I'd behaved at the wedding. "You didn't say too much," she said lightly, wine in hand. "And that little speech of yours really got people talking." Richard's jaw tensed at her comment, and I nodded politely, thinking that honesty can make people uncomfortable. She added, "Oh, it was honesty." Her tone held no malice, only that passive disapproval that cuts deeper than any shout. I wondered if she'd ever dared to defy her own husband. Probably not. In her family, women were taught to smile through their inner bruises. After they left, Richard didn't speak to me for hours. He occupied himself by watching TV while I bathed Lily, sang her to sleep, cleaned the kitchen and folded laundry. At midnight, I discovered him on the back porch, staring blankly into darkness. "I meant what I said yesterday," I whispered, but he didn't turn around. "You made me look like a fool. You made me feel invisible," I continued. Finally, he turned toward me, his tone brittle. "So now you think you're a martyr?" he sneered. "I'm done being invisible," I insisted. He laughed bitterly and said, "You're not going anywhere. You need me. You have no job, no savings, no plan, you're stuck." His voice was calm, as if accepting fate as inevitable as gravity. I closed the door behind me and retreated to bed, where for the first time I began to imagine a life without him. The next morning I started writing lists, not dramatic plans of escape or revenge, but practical steps. A bank account, a resume, daycare arrangements. It felt surreal, like planning for someone else's future. Yet each bullet point lit a spark inside me. Before Lily was born, I had been a graphic designer, freelance gigs with small clients, nothing glamorous but steady. Though I hadn't touched design software in over a year, Richard insisted that I didn't need to work. He made enough, and besides, what kind of mother leaves her baby with strangers just to design logos for vegan bakeries? Still, quietly at night, I downloaded the software again. The first time I opened my laptop, I wept, not from sadness, but because it felt as though I'd reclaimed a piece of myself, the real me, not just the version who folded towels perfectly or memorized which pacifiers Lily liked. Richard barely noticed my quiet transformation, or if he did, he didn't ask. Soon he began coming home later, reeking of whiskey and expensive cologne, insisting it was networking. I didn't press him. I had long learned the rhythm of his lies. One Thursday, when Lily had a fever, I called Richard at work. His assistant informed me, "She's not well," and I said, "I need to take her to urgent care." After a brief pause, his cold, irritated voice came through. "You can handle this, why do you call me for everything?" Stunned, I replied, "I'm not in a meeting, this is important." With a click, I bundled Lily into the car and spent 3 hours alone in the clinic. When the nurse asked if her father was coming, I simply said, "No, he's busy." That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, I opened a new bank account. A canceled client had left me $184 in autopayment, which felt like a fortune at that moment. The next week, I applied for 2 freelance projects, small, modest payments, but enough to prove to me that I was still capable of doing something, of being someone. One client, a woman named Nancy from Colorado, sent me a message after I delivered her logo. "This is beautiful. You really captured what I wanted. Thank you." I stared at her words for a long time. Simple, yet no one had thanked me in months, maybe even years. Now Richard spoke only when necessary, every word clipped and transactional. "Lily needs more wipes. We're low on formula, clean the fridge." One night while I was folding laundry, he walked in with a shirt I hadn't even ironed. "You're getting sloppy," he remarked. I looked up at him, really looked, and noticed he hadn't aged well. Deep creases around his mouth only seemed to emphasize his condescension. I said nothing and just went back to the dryer. He lingered for a moment, perhaps expecting an apology, but I offered none because I wasn't his furniture anymore. 2 weeks after Lily's fever, I landed a job that paid more than all my other gigs combined. A complete website overhaul for a nonprofit in Vermont. It wasn't glamorous, but it came with real deadlines and actual money, and, more importantly, respect. I worked on it at night after Lily had gone to sleep, sipping weak coffee and toiling until my eyes burned. It wasn't easy, but it gave me something that Richard could never touch: momentum. I started hiding receipts, saving every dollar, and even selling old clothes online. Quiet moves, nothing loud. I didn't want him noticing the shift, not just yet. Then something unexpected happened. An old college friend messaged me on Facebook. "Hey, saw your name on a client site. You still doing freelance work, Lauren?" We hadn't spoken in 6 years. "Yeah," I typed quickly before I could overthink it. "Late nights mostly, baby at home. Want to catch up? I'm in town next week." My stomach tightened. Richard wouldn't like that. He never liked any woman who reminded me that I had a life before him. Still, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near the library. A neutral spot. I wore makeup for the first time in months, not out of vanity but as armor. Lauren looked almost the same, wavy blonde hair, a sharp smile, and that laugh that filled the room. "You look great," she said with a hug. "Tired but good," I smiled back. "That's motherhood," I joked. We talked about college, mutual friends, and careers. I told her the sanitized version of my life, but she saw right through. "You okay?" she asked softly. "You just seem like someone holding her breath." I paused, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm just trying to get back to myself." Her eyes softened. "If you ever need real help, I'm here. My firm has a daycare stipend, and we sometimes hire remote designers. I can put in a good word for you." I blinked. "You do that?" She nodded. "You were the best in our class. I always thought you gave up too early." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the version of me who dreamed of creative agencies and city lights, not diapers and silent resignation. 2 days later I submitted my resume. I didn't tell Richard, but he noticed the next week when he found a client invoice in the mail. "What's this?" he demanded, holding it up like it was a threat. "Payment for a project you're working on now." "I never stopped working," I replied calmly. He stared at me, his jaw clenching. "You should have talked to me." "I did." He simply said, "You just didn't listen," and then left the room without another word. No yelling, nothing. That scared me even more. Later I checked all the locks, then emailed Lauren back. "I'm interested. Please keep me in mind." She replied within minutes. "Already did. Interview next week." The interview was over Zoom. I wore a white blouse I hadn't touched since before Lily was born and settled in the corner of the house where Richard's presence was least felt. Dana, the woman interviewing me, was warm, focused, and respectful. Instead of prying about my gap year, she asked about my instincts, my process, and how I balance color theory with branding voice for a good 30 minutes. In that moment I wasn't a wife or a mother, I was just me. When we wrapped up, she smiled and said, "We'll be in touch soon." And I'll tell you now, Lauren's recommendation carries a lot of weight. The moment I logged off, I exhaled deeply, so deeply that I surprised myself. Lily stirred on the baby monitor, and just like that, the spell broke. I closed the laptop, picked her up, and walked around the house with her pressed against my chest, humming. I didn't have the job yet, but I had something better than certainty, hope. That night, Richard came home later than usual. His tie was loose, his eyes glassy from drinking. I asked, too tired to filter my words, and he grunted, "Work stuff." I didn't press him. He offered no further explanation. He looked at me, then around the room, which was cleaner than usual, candles burning, baby asleep, and narrowed his eyes. "What are you so happy about?" "I'm not," I lied, "just tired." He nodded slowly, as though cataloging my answer. "Well, you should be," he said, then walked upstairs without another word. That week I got the call. I was offered the job, part-time, remote, flexible hours, and a starting salary that was enough to build on. "Take your time to think it over," Dana said. "I don't need time. I'm ready and I mean it," I replied. I cried after we hung up. Not from fear or guilt, but from relief. I called Lauren to thank her and she said, "Now you just need an exit plan. You don't have to do everything at once, but you can't stay stuck." She was right. It wasn't just about work, it was about safety. Richard wasn't physically abusive, he never hit me, but his control was a different kind of violence. Quiet, systematic, wrapped in a smile that never reached his eyes. The next day I applied for daycare assistance and contacted a local women's shelter. Not to live there, but to ask about resources just in case. I began looking at one-bedroom rentals, memorizing prices, and every night I deleted my search history. I hid documents in a folder labeled Lily's Growth Charts. I kept my voice light around Richard, kept the fridge stocked and the laundry done, never giving him a reason to scrutinize me for too long. Still, one night as I passed by his office, I sensed him watching. I slowly turned, and there he was, seated in his leather chair, arms folded, gaze unreadable. "You've been busy," he remarked. I froze. "Work, baby. You're always busy for someone who used to be tired all the time. You've got a lot of energy now." I swallowed. "I guess I'm getting better at balance." He nodded once. "Balance," he repeated. He didn't smile or say anything else, just watched as I walked away. My hands trembled by the time I reached the bedroom. The next morning I woke early. Lily was still asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm that calmed me. I poured a cup of coffee, checked my email and found my onboarding documents from Dana waiting in my inbox. Welcome to the team. I stared at those words for a long time. They didn't just mean employment, they meant options. Options meant freedom. That day I did something bold. I visited an apartment, a small, older one-bedroom on the edge of town. It had creaky floors and outdated cabinets, but it was clean, safe, and within reach. I told the manager I was just browsing, but I took pictures, asked about deposits, and memorized the address. When I returned home, Richard was in the kitchen. He looked up immediately as I walked in. You were out, he noted, as if that explained everything. Yes, I said simply, bringing in groceries, not just diapers and formula. He looked past me at the 2 small bags in my hand. They didn't seem like much. It wasn't just about the bags. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. That night, while I bathed Lily, I caught myself humming, something I hadn't done in months. I dried her off, swaddled her, and laid her in her crib, and for a brief moment, I truly believed I could escape quietly. Just me and her, no explosions, no dramatic scenes. But then the phone rang. Richard answered first, his tone curt and clipped. Then he handed the phone to me. It's your mother, he said. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken with her in weeks. Her voice sounded calm but off. Honey, Richard said you've been having a hard time. He mentioned you've been overwhelmed, she continued. My breath caught. He's worried, she added. He said you've been paranoid, maybe even depressed, and that you're pulling away from him and the baby. He said you're working too much. The room spun. I'm fine, I stammered. Don't listen to him. I'm just checking in, she said carefully. Maybe talk to someone just in case. After hanging up, I strode into the living room and stood facing Richard. You called my mother, I said firmly. He didn't flinch. She had asked how I was, and I admitted I was unstable. I told her I was concerned, which, by the way, I am. I stared at him. Why are you doing this? I demanded. Because you're spiraling, and if you can't see it, someone has to. It's subtle, precise, like a blade hidden in velvet. He wanted to discredit me in case I ever tried to leave. He was building a case slowly and silently, just like everything else he did. That night, I printed every document, every pay stub, every email, every bit of evidence about childcare inquiries. I hid them in Lily's diaper bag under the formula. I packed an emergency overnight kit, diapers, wipes, baby food, a change of clothes, and stashed it in the trunk. I told no one because I knew Richard wouldn't let me walk away. He needed to maintain control, and I was done being controlled. The next week passed in a blur of caution. I worked quietly during the day, rocking Lily with one hand while reviewing web layouts with the other. At night, I double-checked everything: passwords, bank statements, hiding spots. I memorized addresses, phone numbers, license plate patterns, and even routes to the shelter. I told no one about my plan, not even Lauren. Yet I sensed that something was coming. Richard's mood shifted. He stopped asking questions, stopped hanging in doorways watching me without speaking. He shut his laptop the moment I entered a room and would occasionally mention our wedding album, our future, the way people do when they're trying to remind you of who you used to be, who you're supposed to be. Then, one night he came home with flowers, peonies my favorite. He hadn't bought me flowers in over 2 years. I thought maybe we could reconnect. He placed them in a vase, as if offering a peace treaty. Let's get back to being a team, he said. I managed a careful smile. That's thoughtful. He poured a glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch, his arm draped along the back, not touching, just hovering. You've been different lately, he observed. Busier, more private. I've had a lot on my plate, I replied quietly. He nodded slowly. Still, you could lean on me more if something's wrong. You can tell me. I looked at him, really looked, and realized this wasn't kindness. It was surveillance dressed up as concern. I'm fine, I said softly. He paused a beat too long before replying. Good, because I think it's important we're on the same page. Later that night, I checked my phone and noticed an unfamiliar app installed. Something called Secure Track. I hadn't downloaded it. My blood ran cold. I checked its permissions, access to GPS, the microphone, messages, it had everything. I deleted it immediately. Then I checked Lily's diaper bag and saw that my emergency folder was missing. I didn't cry. I repacked a new folder with only the essentials and hid it in a place he'd never think to look. The bottom of the garbage bin under the bathroom sink, triple bagged in plastic and paper towels. The next morning, I drove Lily to daycare for a trial run. The building was bright, decorated with art on the walls, and run by a gentle woman named Rosa, who welcomed us like family. I watched through the window as Lily crawled toward a stack of blocks, smiling at the other babies for the first time. I didn't feel guilty, I felt permission. Later, I stopped at a gas station and paid cash for a burner phone. That night I made a call I had dreaded and prayed I'd never have to. The shelter's intake coordinator answered on the first ring. I have a baby, I said, my voice shaking. And I think I need to leave soon, maybe tonight. She didn't ask any questions I couldn't answer. We'll have a room ready. Come when it's safe. Back home, Richard was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone face down, his eyes fixed on mine. He flashed a wide, insincere smile. Again today? He asked. Yes, I replied. Just running errands. You've been running a lot of them lately. I walked past him without flinching when he stood behind me, without showing any fear, though inside I knew it was almost time. That night I lay awake in bed beside him, motionless, listening to his steady breathing as if nothing had changed, like our life hadn't become a chess game with him making the first move. At 3:14 a.m., I slipped out of bed and crept toward the nursery. Lily stirred briefly, then settled back to sleep with one tiny fist tucked under her cheek. I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. By 4 a.m., while the world outside remained dark and still, I wrapped her in a blanket, cradled her close, and quietly left through the back door. The cold, sharp air bit through my sweatshirt as I unlocked the car, praying the sound wouldn't betray me. The emergency bag was already stowed in the trunk, and my burner phone was preloaded with directions to the shelter. I buckled Lily in, climbed behind the wheel, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I didn't dare look back at the house, until I saw the porch light flick on. There he was, standing in the doorway, still barefoot and watching. For a moment he didn't move. Then slowly he stepped forward. My foot hit the gas. I didn't wait to see if he ran after us or to hear his protest. I simply drove through the quiet streets, past sleeping houses. Every red light felt like a trap. Every shadow made me flinch. At 4:43 a.m., I finally arrived at the shelter. A woman named Rosa, not the same Rosa from daycare but another with the same kind, steady demeanor, met me at the door. Without a word of judgment, she opened her arms and guided me inside. They set up a portable crib for Lily and gave me a room with a lock on the inside. For the first time in what felt like years, I closed my eyes without fear. I didn't know what tomorrow might bring, how the custody hearings would unfold, or what twisted version of events Richard would spin, but I knew one thing. We were gone, we were safe, and I wasn't going back. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in a borrowed dress, a microphone in my hand once more. Thomas had called, he said. Claire and I want you to speak. What you said at our wedding, people are still talking about it. I almost laughed, but I agreed. The reception was much smaller this time. A post-wedding dinner for extended family and friends who couldn't travel. Of course, Richard was there, standing at the back with his arms folded, pretending I didn't exist. He had already started spinning his own tale, telling people I'd had a breakdown and abandoned him. He whispered to his mother that I'd been in a facility and told mine that I'd taken Lily without permission. None of it mattered now. I had documentation, witnesses, and a lawyer, a firm, fierce woman who saw right through Richard from the start. The family court process had only just begun, and it would take months, maybe even longer, but today was mine. I took a deep breath and began. At our wedding, I said that marriage is about truly seeing each other, and I meant it. But what I couldn't bring myself to say then, what I didn't have the strength to say, is that sometimes you have to see yourself first because no one else will. I spent years believing I was less, that I was meant to shrink, to stay silent just to survive. I thought if I did everything right, love would return. That the cruelty was just a phase and the coldness was stress. But it wasn't. I looked up. Richard hadn't moved, but his jaw was tight. I left, I said clearly, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Not because I didn't love him, but because I finally loved myself more than someone else's comfort. No one clapped, no one needed to. The silence carried the heavy truth. I handed back the microphone, walked off the stage, and as I passed by Richard, I looked him directly in the eye for the first time in months. He said nothing. There was nothing left for him to say. Back at the shelter that night, I held Lily to my chest and whispered the same 3 words over and over into her soft hair. We are free.